The rain hammered against the diner windows like 1,000 desperate fingers, seeking shelter, but Marcus barely noticed anymore. After 3 years of working the late shift at Joe's 24-hour diner, he'd learned to tune out everything except the orders, the tips, and the clock that told him when he could finally go home to his daughter. Tonight, though, something would happen that would remind him why. Small acts of kindness matter more than we ever realize. Marcus wiped down the counter for the 3rd time that hour, his shoulders aching from a shift that had started at 6 that morning. At 42, he was tired in ways that sleep couldn't fix. Single parenthood did that to you, turned exhaustion into a permanent state of being. His daughter, Sophie, was 12 now, old enough to stay home alone for a few hours, but young enough that every minute away from her felt like a small betrayal. He'd promised her they'd watch that new baking show together when he got home. It was the only thing she'd asked for all week. The bell above the door chimed at 11:47 p.m., and Marcus looked up to see a young woman stumble inside, soaked to the bone. Her mascara ran in dark rivers down her cheeks, though he couldn't tell if it was from the rain or tears. Probably both. She looked maybe 25, wearing what had once been an expensive dress, now plastered against her like a second skin. Her hands were shaking. "Just coffee," she said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. Her voice cracked on the second word. Marcus nodded, reaching for a clean mug. "Cream and sugar?" "Black, strong, please." She wrapped her arms around herself, and that's when Marcus noticed the bruises on her wrist, purple and fresh. He poured the coffee without a word, then grabbed a clean dish towel from under the counter. "Here," he said gently, sliding it across to her. "For your hair." She looked at the towel like it was a lifeline, then up at Marcus with eyes full of something he recognized too well, the look of someone who'd just had their world turned upside down. His late wife, Sarah, had worn that same expression when the doctor first said the word cancer. "Thank you," the woman whispered, pressing the towel to her face. Marcus busied himself wiping down the espresso machine, giving her privacy while staying close enough that she knew she wasn't alone. The diner was empty except for old Frank in the corner booth, who'd fallen asleep over his pie an hour ago. The rain continued its assault on the windows. "Do you need me to call someone?" Marcus asked after a few minutes. "Police? A friend?" She shook her head violently. "No police. I need to think." Marcus poured himself a coffee and leaned against the counter across from her, a respectful distance away. "I'm Marcus. I'll be here until 6 a.m. if you need anything. More coffee, some food, or just someone to make sure you're okay." "Vanessa," she said quietly. Then, after a pause, "I left my fiancé tonight. Well, ran away from him is more accurate." She laughed, but it was hollow. "You probably think I'm crazy, showing up here looking like a drowned rat." "I think you look like someone who just made a really hard decision," Marcus said. "And for what it's worth, those bruises on your wrist tell me it was probably the right one." Vanessa looked down at her wrist, touching the bruises like she'd forgotten they were there. "He said he loved me, that I was making him act that way, that if I just tried harder to make him happy." Her voice broke. "That's not love," Marcus said firmly. "Love doesn't leave marks." She started crying then, really crying, and Marcus slid a box of tissues across the counter. He thought about Sophie, about the kind of man he wanted her to avoid when she grew up, the kind of man he'd spent years teaching her to recognize and run from. "Where will you go?" he asked gently. "I don't know. My family's in Ohio. I have some money in an account he doesn't know about, but not enough for a plane ticket yet. And my phone, I left it at his apartment. I don't even know how to get to the airport from here without him tracking me down." Marcus glanced at the clock. His shift ended at 6 and the airport was 40 minutes away. Sophie would understand. She always did. "I get off at 6, he said. "I can drive you to the airport if you want. My daughter and I were supposed to watch TV tonight, but she'll understand. She's good like that." Vanessa stared at him. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Marcus said simply. "I know you need help, and I can give it. That's all that matters." For the next 6 hours, Marcus worked his shift while Vanessa sat at that counter, nursing coffee after coffee. He brought her soup around 2 a.m. and a piece of apple pie around 4. They talked in fragments, her life, his life, the way the universe sometimes threw curveballs that knocked you flat. She told him about her master's degree in social work, her dreams of opening a shelter for domestic violence survivors. He told her about Sophie, about working 2 jobs to keep them afloat after Sarah died, about how love was worth fighting for but also worth walking away from when it turned poisonous. At 6 a.m. sharp, Marcus clocked out and led Vanessa to his beat-up Honda in the parking lot. The rain had stopped, and the early morning sky was painted in shades of pink and gold. "You sure about this?" Vanessa asked. "It's really far out of your way. Sophie's going to love hearing this story," Marcus said, starting the engine. "She's always telling me I should help people more. Says I have a good heart." He smiled. She got that from her mother. The drive to the airport was quiet, comfortable. When they pulled up to the departures terminal, Vanessa turned to Marcus with tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You probably saved my life tonight. If I'd stayed, if I'd gone back—" She couldn't finish. "You saved yourself," Marcus said. "I just gave you a ride. You're the one who had the courage to leave." She hugged him then, fierce and grateful, and Marcus hugged her back like he would have hugged Sophie. "Be safe," he said. "And when you open that shelter, you make sure every person who walks through those doors knows they're worth saving." "I will," Vanessa promised. "I swear I will." Marcus watched her disappear into the terminal, then drove home to Sophie, who was already awake and making pancakes in their tiny kitchen. "How was work, Dad?" she asked, flipping a pancake with the concentration of a surgeon. "It was a good night, baby girl," Marcus said, kissing the top of her head. "I'll tell you about it over breakfast." 3 months later, Sophie was sprawled on the living room floor doing homework while Marcus prepared dinner in the kitchen. The TV murmured in the background, some news program Sophie had turned on. "Dad!" Sophie's voice suddenly rang out, urgent and excited. "Dad, come here." "Right now." Marcus rushed into the living room, spatula still in hand. "What's wrong?" Sophie pointed at the TV screen. "That's her! That's the woman from the picture on your phone." Marcus had told Sophie the whole story the morning after driving Vanessa to the airport, and she'd made him show her a picture, a selfie, Vanessa had insisted on taking before boarding her flight, so Marcus would have proof that someone cared about what he'd done. On the screen, Vanessa stood in front of a beautiful building with a banner reading, "New Beginnings, a shelter for AM survivors." She was being interviewed by a local news station about her new nonprofit, which had just received a major grant to expand services. "Wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the kindness of a stranger," Vanessa was saying. "A man who worked the night shift at a diner, who drove me to the airport on his only morning off, who reminded me that there are still good people in this world. I don't even know if he'll ever see this. But Marcus, if you're watching, thank you. You saved my life that night, and now I get to help save others. That's your legacy, too." Sophie turned to her father, her eyes shining. "Dad, that's you. She's talking about you on TV." Marcus sank onto the couch, overwhelmed. "I just gave her a ride," he said softly. "No, Dad," Sophie said, sitting beside him and taking his hand. "You gave her hope. That's way more important than a ride." Marcus pulled his daughter close, thinking about that rainy night 3 months ago, about Vanessa's tears, about the small choices we make that ripple out into the world in ways we never see. He thought about Sarah, about how she'd always said that kindness was never wasted, that every good thing you put into the universe came back eventually. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Sophie whispered. "I'm proud of you too, baby," Marcus said, "for understanding why I had to help, for being okay with missing our TV time, for having the kind of heart that gets why this matters." On the screen, Vanessa continued her interview, talking about her vision for the shelter, about the women and children who would find safety there. And in a small apartment across town, a single father and his daughter sat together, reminded that sometimes the smallest acts of humanity create the biggest waves of change. The world could be cruel and cold, like that rainy night 3 months ago. But it could also be warm and full of grace, like this moment right here, watching someone you helped find their wings and learning to fly. That was worth everything.